I forgot to tell my son that the camera was working again. When I checked it, I froze. Aber, that sentence alone still makes my chest tighten. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy with silence, and you almost forget you're living inside a house that used to be full of noise, laughter, and footsteps. My son, Daniel, had left an hour ago, his car still echoing faintly down the driveway. The house had gone still again, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I was sipping cold tea when I remembered the living room camera, the one Daniel had insisted on installing just to keep an eye on you, Mom, after my fall last winter. It hadn't worked for weeks. Some connection issue, he said, but 2 days ago the technician had come by and fixed it. I never told Daniel, I meant to, but you know how time slips away when you live alone. And that small forgetfulness, that tiny, harmless thing, became the doorway to something I never are expected to see. I opened the camera app absent-mindedly, expecting to see the empty living room, the soft beige couches, the sunlight spilling across the rug, maybe a bit of dust dancing in the air, but instead, I saw movement. Abraham Daniel, in my living room. Abraham, he was sitting on the couch, shoulders slumped, head in his hands. His wife Mia stood near the window, her arms crossed tight across her chest. I turned the volume up slightly, hesitant, curious, guilty all at once. Their voices were faint but clear enough to understand. "You can't keep asking her," Mia said, her tone sharp like glass. "Rel, she's your mother, not your bank." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "You think I want to ask her? We're drowning, Mia. The baby's due next month. The bills. See, then get another job," she snapped, "but stop treating her like she owes you." The tea went cold in my hand. They were fighting about me. It felt wrong, like eavesdropping, even though it was my home, my camera. But as I sat there, my heart beating faster than I wanted it to, something inside me whispered that maybe it was time I heard the truth. The kind people only speak when they think no one's listening. Gabriel, Daniel hadn't always been this heavy. When he was little, he used to laugh with his whole body, the kind of laugh that filled a room like sunlight. I raised him alone after his father passed, and we shared everything: stories, meals, worries, dreams. There was never much money, but there was love. And for a while, that was enough. Then life grew harder: rent, jobs, a wedding, and slowly our conversations turned from laughter to numbers. "How much do you have in savings, Mom? Can I borrow just until next month?" I'd tell myself it was fine. That's what mothers do. We give, and we hope it helps. But over the years, the requests blurred together until I stopped counting how many times I'd written checks, emptied accounts, or sold things quietly so he wouldn't feel guilty. I thought Mia didn't know. But that day, hearing her voice trembling with frustration, I realized she knew everything. In the footage, Daniel stood up, pacing. "You don't understand, Mia. Mom doesn't mind. She offers. She wants to help." "She's too proud to say no," Mia shot back. "You think I don't see the way she looks when you ask?" She smiles, but her hands shake. I covered my mouth. She'd noticed that. Even eyes, my hands shook. The camera stayed fixed on their silhouettes, her standing by the light, him trapped in the shadow of my old bookshelf. And then Daniel said something that broke me a little. If it wasn't for her money, we wouldn't even have this house." I paused the footage. The silence of the living room around me felt louder than ever. I looked around, at the walls I'd painted, the photo frames I'd hung, the chair where I'd once rocked him to sleep, and suddenly it all felt unfamiliar. How long had my love turned into something that made him feel entitled rather than grateful? That night, I accompanied Olden sleep. Every creak in the house made me flinch. I kept replaying their words, trying to decide if I should confront him or if doing so would only widen the growing distance between us. But then I thought about that one thing I hadn't seen yet, the rest of the footage. There was more. After Mia left the room, Daniel stayed behind. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and said words that would change everything for me. He Yeah, she'll help again, she always does. Birth a tone. Birth a certainty. Like my generosity, predictable habit, just a reflex he could count on. Birth wrote. My throat tightened. I closed the laptop, staring into the dark, trying to remember where the line between motherly love and self-erasure had blurred. That was the night I decided to test something. Brew. The next morning, I brewed coffee, made pancakes, the way he liked them, soft in the middle, and when he dropped by after work, I smiled like nothing had changed. Daniel, I said softly, handing him his plate. I checked the bank this morning. I'm thinking of closing one of my accounts, simplify things a bit. His eyes flickered, confusion, then worry. Hey, Brika. Oh. Yeah? That's probably smart, Mom. Hey, Brika. He looked nervous. I looked calm, and between us the air felt heavy with something unsaid. Brugger. I didn't mention the camera. Brugger not yet. That was just the beginning. Before I found out what he'd really been doing with the money and before I had to decide whether to save him or finally save myself. I forgot to tell my son that the camera was working again. Key, and when I finally checked it, I froze. It was one of those moments when your heart stops. Not from fear, but from something colder, something that creeps into your bones and makes you feel like the world you've been living in was just a lie. I remember sitting there on the couch, the blue light of the security monitor flickering across my hands, my tea still steaming beside me. What I saw on that tiny screen, that ordinary silent piece of footage, changed how I looked at my son forever. But maybe, before I tell you what I saw, I should tell you how it all began, because sometimes the most painful truths hide behind the most ordinary days. Brewery. My name is Margaret. I'm 64 years old, a retired school librarian, and up until a few months ago, I would have told you I'd lived a pretty peaceful life. My son Ethan was my pride, my only child. He was the kind of boy who held doors open for strangers and brought me flowers from the grocery store just because. After his father passed 10 years ago, he became my reason to get up every morning. We leaned on each other. Too much, maybe. When Ethan got married to Lydia, I tried my best to make room for her in my heart. She was quiet at first, polite in that distant kind of way. Pretty, yes, but she carried herself like someone who'd been disappointed by life more than once. Ethan adored her. That was enough for me. Or at least it was supposed to be. Moved into my house last year after Ethan lost his job. Just for a few months, Mom, he'd said. I didn't hesitate. The house had always felt too big since my husband died, and the thought of having laughter and conversation again made me hopeful. Those first few weeks were sweet. Lydia would cook dinner sometimes. Her pasta tasted like something out of a fancy restaurant. And Ethan would fix things around the house that had been broken for years. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch together, the three of us, sipping tea while the sun disappeared behind the oak trees. I remember thinking, this is what family is supposed to feel like. Slowly, things began to shift. It started with the little things, the kind that make you pause for a moment, then shake off. Lydia stopped joining us for dinner. She said she was tired from job hunting, but somehow her makeup was always fresh and her hair perfect. Ethan became quieter too. I'd find him sitting in the living room late at night, staring at his phone like the world inside it was more important than the one around him. I told myself it was normal. Young couples had their ups and downs. I didn't want to intrude. But one afternoon I noticed Lydia flinch when Ethan brushed past her in the kitchen. It wasn't dramatic, just a small, instinctive movement, like she'd been startled. He didn't notice, but I did. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. The camera, that came later. We'd had an old security system since my husband's time. He was always particular about safety. After he passed, I barely used it. It was just a habit. The quiet red light blinking in the corner of the living room, the small monitor in my bedroom. Then, last winter, we had a break-in down the street. I told Ethan I'd get the system checked again. He said he'd handle it. Don't worry about it, Mom. And he did. Or so I thought. When the technician came weeks later for another neighbor, I asked him to take a quick look at mine too. He told me it wasn't broken at all, just switched off. He turned it back on, tested it, and left. I didn't think much of it. I forgot to tell Ethan that the cameras were working again. A small mistake. A mother's forgetfulness. And that's how it happened. How I saw what I was never meant to see. It was a rainy Thursday. I remember because the gutters outside were overflowing and the house smelled faintly of damp and cinnamon. I had just baked a pie. Ethan and Lydia had gone out earlier, or at least that's what I thought. I was upstairs reading when the storm got louder, and I thought I heard voices downstairs. I went to the monitor, mostly out of habit. It had been weeks since I'd even looked at it. At first, all I saw was the living room, quiet, dim, the lamp flickering from the storm. Then Lydia walked into frame, alone. She sat on the couch, head in her hands, breathing heavily. Something in her looked broken. I remember leaning closer, wondering if I should go downstairs. Then, a few minutes later, Ethan came in after her. What happened next? I can still hear the sound of it in my head. Not shouting, not fighting. Just voices, sharp, low, full of something ugly. And when he raised his hand, I stopped breathing. I wish I could tell you I rushed down right then, that I burst into the room like the fierce mother I once was. But I didn't, I froze. Because that was my son, my baby, the same boy who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare, now standing over his wife with eyes I didn't recognize. I don't know how long I sat there watching. Minutes? Hours? The pie in the oven burned, the thunder rolled outside. I just remember my fingers trembling over the keyboard as I tried to figure out how to stop the recording. As if erasing it could undo it. But deep down, I knew nothing could undo what I'd just seen. That night, when they both came to dinner as if nothing had happened, Lydia's eyes were red, and Ethan kissed her cheek right in front of me. My stomach turned. That's when I realized there were things happening under my own roof that I didn't understand, and I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. Ethan's face, the anger in his voice, Lydia's silent tears. I tried convincing myself I had misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he was just frustrated. Maybe she had said something cruel, but the truth was simpler. It was what it looked like. And once doubt takes root, it spreads like ivy through every corner of your mind. The next morning I cooked breakfast like nothing had happened. Eggs, toast, and the leftover pie that wasn't too burnt to eat. Lydia came into the kitchen first. Her face was puffy, her hair hastily tied up. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, Mom," she said softly. Morning, sweetheart," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Then Etha. N came in, cheerful as ever, kissed her on the cheek, and ruffled my hair like he used to as a boy. "Smells amazing, Mom," he said. It was almost unbearable, that normalcy, watching him pour coffee like he hadn't shattered something sacred the night before. He sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. Lydia sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For the first time, I noticed how she flinched at the sound of his spoon clinking against the cup. That small, nervous movement told me everything I needed to know. The days that followed were like living inside a secret. I went about my routines, gardening, knitting, baking, but I watched, quietly, carefully, the way a teacher watches a troubled student without letting them know. The more I watched, the more patterns I saw. Ibrahim. When Lydia spoke too long on the phone, Ethan's mood would sour. When she laughed, truly laughed, his jaw would tighten. Brew. And when I wasn't around, she would slip outside to sit in the garden, staring at nothing for hours. Abrika, one afternoon, I found a bruise on her wrist. She said she'd burned herself on the oven, but there was no burn mark, just a faint purple outline of fingers. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I turned the monitor back on. I watched the quiet flicker of my living room for hours, feeling both ashamed and desperate. There's something about secrets. Once you start uncovering them, you can't stop. You become addicted to knowing, even if the truth poisons you. A week later, Lydia knocked on my door. Abria, her voice trembled as she asked, "Can I come in, Mom?" She sat at the edge of my bed, hands shaking slightly. I could tell she wanted to say something, but fear held her tongue. Instead, she asked, "Do you ever feel trapped, Margaret? Like the walls are closing in?" Grr. I nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. After my husband passed." "You're lucky." "After my husband passed, someone who loved you until the end." "Hey, Brew." I reached for her hand. "Lydia, is something wrong? You can tell me." She hesitated, her lips parted, and then Ethan's footsteps echoed down the hallway. Ebro, in an instant, her face changed. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and forced a smile. "Ebro just needed a mother's advice," she said quickly, before leaving. I sat there in the silence that followed, my heart pounding, my chest heavy with helplessness. The following evening, I saw something that broke the last piece of denial in me. Ethan had been in the garage for hours. I thought he was fixing something. He often tinkered when he was stressed, but when I went down to bring him tea, I saw Lydia standing near the doorway, quietly crying. Ethan's voice came from inside, low and sharp. "Ibra, you think you can run to her about our business?" he said. "No, Ethan, I didn't." "Don't lie to me!" Ibra's hand came down hard on the workbench, making the tools rattle. I stepped back, my breath caught in my throat. Lydia backed away. "Tea." "Ooh," her arms up defensively. That's when I saw the fear. Not just in her, but in me. Because this wasn't just anger. It was control, possession. I left the tea on the stairs and went back up before they saw me. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped the cup. At night, I made a decision. I couldn't pretend anymore. The next morning I visited my neighbor, Marjorie. She's been my friend for 30 years, the kind of woman who speaks her mind without sugarcoating it. I told her everything. She listened quietly, her eyes widening a little more with every word. "Keyboard." "Margaret," she said finally, "you can't let this continue. You need to do something before it gets worse." "Burke, I can't just report my own son," I whispered. She placed her hand over mine. "Then at least protect that girl, because if you don't, one day you'll regret it." Those words haunted me all night. So I started keeping a journal. Not out of curiosity, but out of fear. I wrote down everything, the times they argued, things I saw, even the tone of Ethan's voice. I dated every page, as if building a quiet testimony. Then, one morning, I found Lydia sitting at the kitchen table with a packed bag. "I'm leaving, Mom," she said softly. "But I can't tell you where. Please don't ask." "And my heart raced. "Does Ethan know?" "No." "Not yet, but when he does, he'll come looking." Not wanted to beg her to stay, to let me help. But I saw the terror in her eyes, and I knew if I said one wrong word, she might never make it out that door. So I just hugged her, long and tight. "Be safe." "Be safe," I whispered. "And remember, you're not alone." "Hey, Brew." She smiled weakly and left. That was the last time I saw her. Neighbor. Later that evening, Ethan came home. Ebro, his face was pale, Svail, his face was pale, his voice shaking. Where is she, Mom? I lied. I said I didn't know. Keeper searched. He searched the house, room by room, calling her name. When he finally gave up, he looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the person in front of me. You knew, he said quietly. Ebruhi. And then, in the softest, most frightening voice I've ever heard from him, he whispered, Fur, do you know what happens to people who betray family, Mom? That's when I realized I was protecting myself. For 3 days after Lydia left, the house felt haunted. Ebrura, not by ghosts, but by the absence of sound. No laughter from the kitchen. No soft humming from the laundry room, just silence pressing against the walls like fog. Ethan barely spoke. He'd leave early in the morning and return late, smelling of whiskey and rain. His eyes looked hollow, dark rings beneath them, and when he did speak, it was sharp, clipped, like every word cost him a piece of restraint. Ebru, I knew he was unraveling. I just didn't know how far it would go. Ebru. One evening, I found him sitting in Lydia's old chair by the window. He was staring out into the yard, still as stone. Ebru, Ethan, I said gently. You should eat something. Ebru, he didn't turn around. She's not answering, He exhaled. He exhaled. Give her time. He exhaled. He exhaled, a harsh, trembling sound. She doesn't get to just leave me like that, Mom. After everything I did for her, Copper. There it was again, that flicker in his voice, possession disguised as love. I wanted to say, you did this to her, but I held my tongue. I'd learned long ago that sometimes silence protects you more than truth. Silence protects you more than truth. That night, as I was heading to bed, I noticed their blinking faintly. It had been off for weeks, ever since I'd unplugged it after that first dreadful night. But now, it was on again. My stomach tightened. Still, I hadn't touched it. And no one else knew how to restart the system. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I sat down, opened the camera feed, the one in the living room. Bruise. It was dark, quiet. The only light came from the television's dim glow. Then, movement. Gabriha, a shadow crossed the frame. Ethan, he was pacing, muttering to himself. I turned up the volume slightly. She thinks she can hide, he was saying, his voice low and shaking. She thinks she can just run away after what she did. He threw something. I heard the glass shatter. I should have turned it off. I threw it off. I pretended I hadn't seen it. But something in me, a mother's fear maybe, made me keep watching. He walked to the cabinet, pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside were photos, Lydia's pictures. He started ripping them, one by one, whispering between gasps. Suddenly he froze. His head turned toward the camera, straight at it. For a moment our eyes met through that flickering lens. He knew. The next morning I found the camera unplugged again. Nothing was said, nothing needed to be. Ethan acted normal, almost too normal. He made breakfast, hummed to himself, even complimented my coffee, but every smile felt like a lie stretched thin over madness. I realized I was living with a stranger who wore my son's face. That afternoon, Marjorie called. I saw E.T. Han outside the grocery store, she whispered. He was asking people if they'd seen Lydia. He's not right, Margaret, be careful. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. That's when I heard a thud upstairs. When I climbed the stairs, I found Ethan in my room, standing near my dresser, holding my journal, the one where I had written everything. Every single thing. Labrock looking for something? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the pages, scanning, calculating. So, he said slowly, you've been spying on me too. I was protecting her. I replied. And myself. Ibri ilet hollow laugh. Protecting yourself from your own son? Is that what you tell people now? Heathen, I whispered. You need help. For a moment his expauffend had broken through, but then he slammed the journal shut and said, "The only person who needs help here is you, Mom. You're losing it." He dropped the journal on the bed and walked out, slamming the door so hard that the frame rattled. I stood there, frozen, the air thick with the smell of his cologne and anger. That was the night I started locking my door. Days turned into a slow, anxious blur. I avoided him as much as possible, staying in my room or in the garden. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of a shadow made me jump. Abro. I had never been afraid of my son before. Now, I was terrified of him. And then, one morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Lydia stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes red, her hair disheveled, but she was alive. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" she asked in a whisper. Before I could answer, she added, "I need to talk to you before he finds out." I quickly ushered her inside, my heart pounding. She clutched a small folder against her chest. Shaking, Lydia, what happened? Where have you been?" She took a deep breath, tears brimming in her eyes. "He's been hiding something, Margaret. Something bad. I found out just before I left." What do you mean?" She opened the folder and pulled out a few papers, receipts, copies, and one photo. "These are from his office. He's been taking money, large amounts, from his company, and he's using your name." I froze. "My name? She nodded. "He opened an account under yours. I didn't want to believe it, but..." Footsteps echoed from the hallway. We both turned. Ethan stood there. That smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well," his surprise, that the air turned heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lydia hid the folder behind her back, but Ethan had already seen it. He walked closer, slow, deliberate. "You couldn't stay away, could you?" "Ethan, please," I started, but he raised a hand. Mom, you stay out of this. This is between me and my wife. And I'm not afraid of you anymore." That's when I did something I didn't even think I was capable of. I reached for the phone and pressed the button to record the call. My hands shook as I held it low by my side, because this time I wanted proof, not just for Lydia, for myself. He lunged forward, grabbing the folder from Lydia's hand. The papers scattered like feathers floating across the floor. She screamed. I stepped in between them, pushing him back, my palms flat against his chest. "Enough!" I yelled. "You stop this right now!" For a moment he froze, the shock on his face, seeing his own mother stand against him, was almost worse than his rage. Then, without another word, he stormed out. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house like a gunshot. Lydia collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. I held her close, my own tears silent but endless. That was the moment I knew this story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. That night when I checked the camera again, I saw something I'll never forget. The feed from the driveway showed Ethan sitting in his car, staring at the house. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. For 3 hours. And then he smiled. Brooker right at the camera. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The ticking clock, the creaking wood, even the hum of the refrigerator. It all blended into a low, nervous rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. Lydia slept in the guest room, curled up on the edge of the bed like someone expecting danger. I sat by the window, watching the driveway through the curtains. Ethan's car was still there when the clock struck midnight. Then, slowly, his headlights flickered on and disappeared down the road. But that smile I'd seen on the camera, it stayed burned behind my eyes. The next morning, Lydia and I packed her things quietly. She wanted to go to her sister's house 2 towns away just to be safe. I tried to convince her to stay longer, but she shook her head. "Ibrashi knows we. You live," she said softly. "And if he's watching, he can't see me leave from here." We waited until the afternoon when the sun was bright and neighbors were outside tending their lawns, witnesses in a way. Lydia hugged me tight before she got into the car. Her hands were cold. "Please, Margaret," she whispered. "If he comes back, don't be alone." "I won't." I lied. Ebru, she drove off, and I stood at the gate until her car disappeared from sight. That's when I saw the tire tracks near the hedge, fresh ones still damp from the night's rain. He'd been here, again. That evening I went to the police station. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, but when the officer asked, "What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" My voice cracked. "My son," I said. "I think he's dangerous." The officer frowned, taking notes. I explained everything, the threats, the camera footage, the fake accounts in my name. He listened, patient but skeptical. "Do you have proof of these accounts?" he asked. "Not yet," I added. "Did. But Lydia, his ex-wife, she does. She's taken it all with her." He nodded slowly. "Until we have that documentation, there's not much we can do, but if you feel unsafe, we can do a welfare check. Maybe keep an eye on your house." I signed a form, hands trembling. As I left the station, I caught my reflection in the glass door. An old woman, small and tired, clutching her purse like it was armor. I barely recognized myself. When I got home, the front door was slightly ajar. A chill crawled down my spine. I pushed it open slowly. My breath caught in my throat. The lights were off. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock. Then I smelled it. His cologne. Ethan's cologne. I moved toward the living room, my footsteps soft on the wooden floor. And there he was, sitting on the couch, head lowered, hands clasped, waiting. Breaking. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly. "We need to talk. I wanted to run." But instead, I stood still. Maybe because a mother's instinct, even when it warns her of danger, never fully lets go of love. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, hollow, but his smile was calm. Too calm. "I wanted to see if you're still taking her side." "I'm taking the side of what's right. You've terrible things." "Terrible things?" "I took money that was mine. You think I don't deserve it after what Dad left you?" "You've always held that over me." "This isn't about money," I said softly. "It's about what you've become." It's about what she stood, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You always looked at me like I was broken, like I needed fixing. But guess what, Mom? I don't need your approval anymore." "Then why are you here?" I whispered. Bruise. He paused, his jaw clenched, and for the first time I saw the tears glistening in his eyes. "Because I wanted to see if you'd forgive me." Twisted something inside me, a strange mix of pity and fear. I took a step closer, trying to read his face. "I can forgive you," I said gently, "but you need to take responsibility. Go to the police, tell them the truth." His eyes darkened again. "You called them, didn't you?" I froze. Oz. He took a step forward, his voice rising. "You went behind my back. You told them lies about me. Ethan, listen. Griffin, no!" He slammed his fist against the wall. The sound made me flinch. You've always betrayed me. First Dad leaves, then Lydia walks out, and now you turn on me too?" His breathing grew ragged. I reached for my phone in my pocket, slowly, quietly, but he saw. "Brooke, don't," he warned. His voice was low, dangerous. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. "I just want to call someone to help you," I said softly. "Ian, you can't help me anymore," he murmured. Then, almost like a whisper, "You never could." He turned away and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back and said, "You'll regret this, Mom. You always do." The door slammed. Shut. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. That night, I didn't move from the couch. I just sat there, staring at the darkened doorway, the faint smell of his cologne still hanging in the air. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold a glass of water. The next morning, the police called. They'd found Ethan's car abandoned near the old mill road. His wallet was inside, but he was gone. Gone. For the first time in months, I didn't know whether to feel fear or relief. 2 days later, Lydia returned. She handed over a USB drive and several signed documents, proof of everything Ethan had done, the bank accounts, the transfers, even voice messages he'd left her when he was drunk. We sat together in silence after I gave it all to the police. The officers promised they'd handle it, but I knew deep down, justice doesn't always come through courts. Sometimes it comes through time. That evening, as the sun set, I found myself watching the security camera again. I don't even know why. Maybe I needed to see an ending. And for a while, there was nothing. Just the quiet street, the golden light fading over the trees. Then movement. A figure standing at the edge of the driveway, too far to see clearly, but tall, still, watching. I blinked, leaned closer to the screen. And then the feed cut to black. The next few days passed in a blur of police visits, neighbors' whispers, and sleepless nights. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Fear, guilt, grief, everything blended together into one long ache that lived in my chest. The police searched the nearby woods, checked hospitals, called old friends. Ethan had vanished completely. No sign of him. No footprints. No trace. Lydia stayed with me again, though both of us were ghosts moving through the house. Every time a car passed by, she'd tense up. Every time the phone rang, I felt my stomach twist. But there was no call. No message. No Ethan. 3 weeks later, I decided to check the camera again. The same one that had started all this. It had been recording continuously since that night. Part of me didn't want to see, but another part needed closure, to know if that shadow I saw was real or just my imagination. I opened the file folder and scrolled through the footage. Nothing. Just the stillness of my quiet street. Then, on the 5th night after his disappearance, I froze. There he was. Ethan, standing at the edge of the driveway again. He looked thinner, hollow-eyed, but he wasn't alone this time. A small car pulled up and he walked toward it. He opened the passenger door, sat down, and smiled. The driver leaned over to kiss him on the cheek. It wasn't Lydia. I zoomed in, and my heart stopped. It was my neighbor's daughter, the same young woman who used to help me water my plants when I was out of town. She couldn't have been more than 23. Ethan had disappeared, but not because he was lost. He had left. He'd staged everything, the abandon. Carr, the threats, the drama, all to disappear on his own terms, to escape the consequences. And now, watching him laugh with that girl, I realized something that made my hands tremble on the keyboard. He wasn't broken, he was cold. I called the police immediately. They came, reviewed the footage, and confirmed it was recent. They said they'd follow up, but the officer's tone made it clear they didn't expect to find him anytime soon. People like Ethan, they don't want to be found, Tibrahi Lydia cried when I told her, not because she wanted him back, but because she finally understood the full depth of his deceit. He's not coming back, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. He never planned to. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to speak. Vibri, there was no comfort in being right, only emptiness. In the following weeks, I started putting my life back together, piece by piece. Aberfi, I changed the locks. Aberhi installed new cameras, repainted the walls where his shadow seemed to linger. Eberha, but grief has a strange way of settling in, not loud or sudden, but quiet and constant, like dust that refuses to leave the corners. Sometimes I'd catch myself setting an extra plate at the table. Other times, I'd hear a car door slam and my heart would jump thinking, he's back. Eberhi, but he never was. Then one morning, I received a small envelope in the mail. Eberhi, no return address. Just my name, written in Ethan's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Eberhi, Mom. Eberhi, you were always too good for me. Eberhi, don't worry about me, I've found peace in my own way. Febrahi, tell Lydia I forgive her. Shibrawi, tell yourself you did your best. Saf. Hebrew, no apology, no remorse, just words. Neat, calculated, detached. Eber, but something about that letter didn't sit right. Ebri, the phrasing was too formal, too rehearsed. Then I noticed the faint mark at the bottom corner, a small smudge of ink, the same kind Lydia's cheap printer left when it ran low. Ebrahi. I walked into the kitchen holding the letter. Lydia was ting by the window, sipping her coffee. What? Did you print this? I asked quietly. What? She looked up, startled. What? This letter, I said, and did you write it? Brr, she froze, color draining from her face, for a moment, but then her eyes filled with tears. Brooke, I had to, she said finally. They wouldn't close the case without something. I thought if they believed he was gone for good, we could move on. You could move on. Hebron. I felt my knees weaken. I sat down slowly, trying, and absorb her verb, absorb her verb. Words, Ibra. You forged a letter, I whispered, pretending to see, to be him. She nodded. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just couldn't take the waiting anymore, the fear, the questions. I stared at her, this woman who had been both victim and survivor in her own way. And for the first time I realized everyone in this story had been running from something. Heathen ran from accountability. Lydia ran from pain. and I'd been running from the truth. For the truth that sometimes, no matter how much love you pour into someone, you can't save them. You can only love them enough to let go. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the street outside. Ibrahim, the security light flickered. Ibrahim, the shadows swayed, and for a brief moment, made beer brave matching. Ibrahim, but when I blinked, it was gone. Maybe it was him. Ibrahim, maybe it was just the wind playing tricks. Either way, I whispered into the darkness. Breke, wherever you are, Ethan, I forgive you. And in the faint hum of the night, I could almost imagine a whisper back, not of apology, but of peace. You know, when I look back now, it's strange how love can break you and still keep you alive. People think a mother's love is soft, gentle, like warm soup on a cold day. But the truth is, it's made of iron and fire. You'll walk barefoot through storms, you'll forgive sins that shouldn't be forgiven, and you'll keep a light burning, even for the child who walks into the dark on purpose. Ethan wasn't born cruel. He was born lost. And I kept trying to be his map, even when he tore the pages apart. But sometimes, love isn't about saving someone. It's about learning when to stop bleeding for them. The night I whispered, I forgive you. I didn't do it for him. I did it for me. Because holding on to pain, it eats you alive. It takes away the laughter from your mornings, the peace from your prayers, the warmth from your home. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what someone did. Bruise. It means choosing to stop reliving it. If you've ever loved someone who hurt you, really hurt you, I hope you understand this. You're not weak for still caring. You're human. But there comes a day when you have to close the door, even if your heart stays pressed against it. Ethan will always be my son. Bruise, but he doesn't live here anymore. Not in this house, not in this heart. I keep one picture of him on the shelf. Not because I'm clinging to the past, but because every story needs to be remembered. Even the ones that broke us. Bruise. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind moves through the curtains just right, I still talk to him. Not as the boy who lied, not as the man who left. Oh, but as the son I once held in my arms, because love never truly disappears. Bruise, it just changes shape. So if you're listening to me right now and you're still waiting for someone to come home, maybe this is your sign. Don't wait by the window forever. Bruise, close the curtain. Bruise, light a candle for yourself this time. And move forward.